Thank you very much all for coming along tonight. I think David needs no introduction whatsoever. He's done so many TV programs, written so many books, and so many fascinating things to his life. I'm sure we're going to hear a bit about that as well. But Apollo 13, everyone knows about. We all know what the problems were.
Can I go then?
We don't really know the detail. So what we're going to find out tonight is a little bit more about what Apollo 13 was all about, and buy the book afterwards.
Yes.
That seems to be the key to it.
It does.
Well, I'll hand over to David.
Thank you, Alistair. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. It's a great pleasure to be here and an honour as well, because I think it's wonderful what is happening in the British Interplanetary Society now, and it's great. It's a great time to be part of it, and I do thank you for coming, because this is a fundraising effort, and while the BIS has a lot of aspirations through its cerebral and sometimes esoteric activities, which is what characterises it, we do need money in this world in order to maintain and consolidate the society and to grow. So it's lovely to see you coming for these kind of things with only me as the speaker, because the real attraction is, of course, that you are supporting the BIS. The reason I'm here is because of Anne, who is my partner, who at a lunch with Haynes suddenly said, how about doing a book on Apollo 13? And the whole place erupted, and I think I was signed up there and then on the spot, and they said yes, without even knowing what it was going to be. And so the reason that we are here doing this is thanks to Haynes, which is a very productive cycle of books to do with space, science fiction, and it's a very popular format because it allows people like me and others to go right down into the technologies and the engineering aspects that otherwise would not find a platform in today's world, where there's such a facile reference to space very often, and yet we do need to preserve the record of events and activities that happened many decades ago, because these things will be lost unless they're talked about. And it's very surprising to me how much is being lost, both in the archives and at the space agencies, that is no longer available for reference. So people like me, I think, really do these things because we have a great passion to see history recorded and to tell it as honestly as we can and incisively as we can from a perspective going back decades to how it actually was at the time. And so in looking at Apollo 13, 11th to the 17th of April 1970, it's no great moment as an anniversary. It's 43 years, almost 44 years, but it was in some ways the finest hour for NASA and for the Apollo program. As Alistair said, you all know the story, so I can tell the end before the beginning, and give you the fact that it is the way in which that mission was achieved and satisfactorily brought to a successful conclusion is really the story that I want to impart, which is a little different for Apollo 13 to many of the reports that I have seen in references and in books and in magazines. And it is essentially a story this evening about the engineering challenges. So I'm not going to insult you by going through all the nitty-gritty of the Apollo 13 story, but I'm going to take you on a route that perhaps is a little different to that a lot of stories of this mission will take you on.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's my privilege to introduce our speaker tonight. It's always great news when Dave Baker has written yet another book, because often we get a really good talk out of it. The book is, as you see, US Spy Satellites. I know you will be itching to get a copy. Could I urge you to buy it tonight for the princely sum of £20? Get Dave to sign it. Tonight the proceeds are going to the Society and not to David. So tonight, please. Anyway, as obviously that is the subject of tonight's talk, but Dave is not going to just go through the book. He's going to give us more of the background and the policy background that led to the satellites that are in the book, a subject about which he knows an awful lot more that I know that he can tell us tonight. But anyway, so David, over to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you. Well, good evening from me, and very welcome to you all to the BIS and another evening here. And thank you also for coming to buy a book and support this society, which really is quite an outstanding organ of astronautical expertise among so many people and so many talented engineers, scientists, and historians and people who follow the space program and who are essentially protagonists of our common ambition, which is to proselytize the expansion of humankind into space. I think mostly the history of the space program is written from the civilian side. The British Interplanetary Society is not primarily concerned with military aspects of space, and I think that is how it should be. But for once this evening, what I'd like to do is to marry up my own fascination with the engineering and the technology of space vehicles and satellites, also with another aspect of my work. I am a member of the International Institute of Strategic Studies, and right from the get-go in my life, I did a lot of work on strategic weapons analysis under Herman Kahn at the RAND Corporation. And at the time when we were developing concepts for strategic nuclear warfighting, there were many aspects that I was aware that were creeping in that was essentially the other part of the iceberg that you don't see. The space program is commonly believed to be, whenever people think of a space program, they think, for good or ill, and maybe it's not always the right thing, they think of NASA. They should be thinking of the European Space Agency, because the European Space Agency is achieving remarkable things with much less resources and hopefully a collegiate of support that, irrespective of our particular political feelings about the most recent move away for this country from Europe, nevertheless those bonds cannot be severed by politicians, because they're there in the driving ambitions of scientists and engineers who throughout time have wanted to talk to each other and build great things in the advancement of human progress. But nevertheless, in that comes a requirement for safety, security, and national security, and it is that element that I would like to focus on. While I will be going shortly through a description of the basic types of optical and electro-optical satellites that have formed part of the constellation of US intelligence gathering assets, I want to link that both to what this country is involved with at the end. We'll come back to the intelligence aspect, and I'll give you a brief run-through, a surprise perhaps to some of you, of the important and singularly monumental role that this country plays in the gathering of intelligence for the use of Western powers. And we will look basically at what those resources are. But this is the iceberg we're looking at. The bit you normally see is the civilian bit, which is a little bit on top. The vast bulk of space operations, which takes up much more money than NASA, is the part that is not generally discussed. And I think even in the very peak of spending in the Apollo years, far more money was being spent by various organs and departments of the United States government in military programs. But let me say instantly, if anybody leaves before I'm finished, I must make it absolutely clear that no weapons have been put into space, even though we have come pretty close with cannon-armed Soyuz vehicles, and also with various US vehicles, which perhaps we've no need to go into in detail, but no actual weapons that are capable of destroying satellites in the conventional way we think of them have been deployed into orbit.
We are very pleased to have David with us again. David, of course, keeps us on the straight and narrow, and his 25 years with NASA really does tell us what it's all about. And I believe you have a couple of books here which you might want to you might want to sign afterwards. So I'm going to let David introduce things, because I don't think I have anything more to say.
Yes.
Over to you, David. Thank you,
Alistair. And and that was for him, I know. Nice to be here with you again. It seems it's been about a year since I came here and gave a talk on the subject. I think the last time I was here was experiences of Apollo 13, etc. And really this talk splits that particular kind of story and straddles whole era from beginning to the present period. And we use these various words, rocket plane, space plane, quite liberally, and in the peculiarities of this talk that I'm going to be giving you this evening, what I'm really defining rocket planes are as aircraft that predominantly fly in the atmosphere but are propelled by reactions. No company, but hopefully soon. Regard, it's a largely untold story, but one which could have totally dominated the entire evolution of the space program. It's become a very favourite part of my over the years, always been there lingering in left field somewhere, and it's come home with 2 books. Haynes had me do a book on the X-15, which is here this evening. The BIS is selling those for £20, and I say this not out of some virtuous statement, but please, you're supporting the BIS by buying these books, not me, because I'm just a messenger. There are Americans who are involved with the Europeans here who feel that there's a much more vibrant, and these are senior NASA people, one of whom I had lunch with very, very recently, who said there's a more vibrant attitude and a more go-get-it mentality in the European Space Agency than there is anywhere in NASA today. And there are people here who are working on projects in Europe that are cooperative ventures with the United States, who are getting very disturbed at the negativity which is permeating. You go around a lot of facilities now, they're half empty. There's a lackluster approach. The agency is desperately underfunded. It's trying to do far too much with what it's got. Something's going to have to give. So just think of Concorde and the SST, which was the American counter. The Americans fell flat on their face on that. We developed Concorde with the French, and it was a success. I mean, from 1962, when the deal was signed, you know, we were producing something that could actually turn an operating profit. It's only one step further to amortize the investment, because once you know, at the moment in America, everything is subsidized. All these so-called commercial launches, there's no difference really between paying Lockmart or Boeing than there is paying SpaceX or Orbital ATK. The government is still paying these people. They're not actually paying for it themselves. And they need the NASA contracts to get the deal. So these companies are being subsidized by the American taxpayer. Hundreds of millions of dollars a year are going to keep SpaceX and Orbital ATK alive on the space station supplies. And then they're being paid on a per-mission basis as well. So when they say, oh, we're going off to Mars next week, you know, for whom? Because you haven't got the resources to even pay yourselves to turn a profit going to the space station. And that's what worries me. There's just not enough reality. We don't do go out into fiction. Great, fantastic. But if you're really talking real world space stuff, it's got to conform to these pragmatic commercial requirements.